Hi, I'm Patty Ann Brown, and you are in the strategy room. We are going to build a wall and make the Coast Guard pay for it. That's the way some describe a draft proposal from the Office of Management and Budget to fund President Trump's proposed multi-billion-dollar wall on the southern border. Other departments that might be affected are FEMA and the TSA. Here now to discuss are Professor of Political Science at Iona College, Jeannie Zaino, and the CEO of American Civics Exchange, Flip Pideaux. Thank you both for joining us. So the OMB proposal calls for slashing the Coast Guard budget by 14%. Critics say the Coast Guard is crucial in curbing illegal immigration and drugs and in counterterrorism patrols of ports, among other things. That's according to the Washington Post. So, Flip, does this OMB budget reflect President Trump's priorities?
You wouldn't think so, right? I mean, this sort of seems like a surprising and to me, kind of tone-deaf way to go about paying for it, especially because obviously Trump has long said Mexico is going to pay for it. But if at least in the interim we need to find the dollars in our own budget, there's so much lower-hanging fruit in terms of big categories of government waste to go after and make it sort of a secondary story to it. Look, we're going to build the wall. Yes, it's going to cost money, but look, I'm also slashing the federal budget in wasteful areas. It seems kind of off-message, off-brand to be saying we're going to do that by whacking away at existing, and for the most part, from what we've been able to see, fairly successful, well-liked parts of the rest of the Homeland Security complex. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this kind of get scuttled and go back to the drawing board, because, as I said, it seems off-message and I think unlikely to gain a lot of support.
Yeah, it is just a draft, and folks are saying, look, it's premature to worry too much about it because it is subject to change. But as it is, this OMB proposal calls for cutting also the Transportation Security Administration by 11%. The Washington Post says TSA vital for airport security, training pilots to respond to terrorist incidents, and also this Viper program for high-level security sweeps of potential targets like train stations. And FEMA would also be cut 11%. Jeannie, your response.
I have to say it seems incredibly ironic to imagine that you're building a wall to secure the southern border, and yet you're taking the money to pay for that wall from the very institutions that help keep us secure, whether it's the TSA or the Coast Guard. So I have a lot of trouble imagining that President Trump and his administration would support or put this forward, and I have even more trouble imagining Republicans in Congress and Democrats would support pulling this money and diverting it over to the wall. They're going to have to find another way to pay for the wall. This was part of the problem we heard during the campaign, right, was it was going to be paid for by Mexico. In the interim, when it's not being paid there, it's got to be funded. And you cannot fund it by taking money away from these institutions that secure us. And this is something that the president is going to have to deal with in his budget, and Republicans who control Congress are going to have to deal with as well. It's simply not going to work this way, and very few people would support this kind of proposal.
Yeah. Flip, what happened to Mexico paying for the wall? You mentioned that these are just temporary measures, and the theory is that Mexico is one way or the other going to reimburse eventually. What happens to that reimbursement? Does it go back to these agencies that were cut, or just what happens?
My guess is that realistically all along the most likely or only plausible way that Mexico would pay for it would be they'll find some kind of after-the-fact accounting gimmick to say, well, we've renegotiated this trade deal, and according to our math, it comes to X billion dollars net flowing into or not flowing out of the U.S. or being accrued through various tariffs and other taxes that we're going to say that sort of makes us whole for whatever the outlay for the wall is. So I think that'll be more kind of accounting gimmickry on the back end, but the more real, tangible, immediate impact is how do we offset that in the budget, here, within the borders of our country, where there's only so much money to spend.
Budgeting is, only so much money to spend. That's the problem with budget. So one of the proposals for having Mexico reimburse is a border adjustment tax. Do you think that's feasible?
That could be feasible. I also think what's feasible is to view the wall less as a security measure and more of as an infrastructure investment. And so you create a partnership between the government and private companies who want to do this kind of work, and you're investing in American companies and you're investing in American workers. And in that way, you're not taking money, pulling money from the public sector to pay for this wall. So I think we need to rethink how we view the wall. Sure, it can be seen as a security measure, but it can also be seen as an important infrastructure. And that kind of investment is something that the president has talked a lot about. Lord knows we need the jobs, we need that kind of investment. So I think that's another strategy that Congress and the president should look at as well.
That is an interesting theory, and Trump is really big on infrastructure.
And it's a bipartisan support for the most part.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Jeannie, Flip, thank you both so much for joining us. And for complete political coverage, stay right here on FoxNews.com. I'm Patty Ann Brown. Thanks for watching.